Radio Al Ansar podcasts.
Do you want to live your life to the fullest? Be present in the moment and choose your path consciously. Join me, Nazia Iram Osman, for my show Mindful Matters, an hour of inspiration, information and motivation. The show to help you rejuvenate, replenish and renew yourself. See you soon on Sundays from 1 to 2. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show Mindful Matters on Radio Al Ansar, 90.4 FM in Durban and 105.6 FM in Pietermaritzburg. A show that promises to provide an hour of inspiration, information and motivation with me, your host, Nazia Iram Osman. Please feel free to participate in the show. Today we are live. You may WhatsApp your questions or feedback to 060-904-1056. I'm hoping you participate because we have quite an interesting topic today. And we've tried to hit this topic from every angle. So the topic for today is Parenting 2.0. It is easy to judge both parents and children. However, in order to understand the difficulties and challenges facing parents today, we must understand the greater complexity and change dynamics that are involved. Example, balancing family and career, being afraid to say no, a culture of blame, ensuring children receive a quality education, and balance that with an overload of information. And to tell us more about this is the dynamic duo, clinical psychologist Dr. Shaista Hamid and educator Mr. Shaista Hamid. He's a teacher, mentor, and renowned physics tutor. And as a special, like a bumper prize, a special guest, and that is their son Hasnain. Welcome, you guys, to Mindful Matters.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Nazia. Jazakallah for having us once again.
Well, I think now you owe me like coffee after this. Yeah? I've got the whole family on. I need caffeine.
Definitely.
So we've had Dr. Shaista Hamid on the show twice before. And as mentioned, she has extensive experience in matters of the mind and has worked in universities, SAPs, and the health department as well. But this is the first time we have the rest of the family. We have Mr. Shaista Hamid with us and Hasnain. So Hasnain, I wonder if you can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you do and your experience with children.
Assalamu alaikum, Nazia. My name is Shaista Hamid. I hail from Chatsworth. I have a degree in BPed with a leaning in science. I've taught at public and at private schools. I started off my career in Newcastle. Right. I spent approximately 10 years at Lincoln Heights Secondary at a public school there. Mm-hmm. And thereafter I've moved on to a private school in Durban. I was at Al Falah College for approximately 11 years, up to 2015. Between 2015 and 2019, I did quite a bit of freelance work with quite a few of the smaller private schools and home schools. And this year I was actually appointed at a public school once again, at Reservoir Hill Secondary. Primarily, I teach mathematics and physical science mainly to the senior learners in grades 10, 11 and 12.
Okay, so the age group that you're working with is about?
Well, it varies a bit, but I would say roughly between 14 and about 19.
The fun years, hey?
The
But the terrible twos happen again, like amplified.
Very much so.
And you know, this topic, I don't know if you remember how it came up. We were just chatting, and okay, I'll let the listeners know. You can let the listeners know why we chose the topic today.
Do I?
Shaista, do you remember?
I think it was basically we're discussing it from holistic perspective of an educator versus a mum versus a psychologist, of how we look at parenting today and the challenges that we are being faced with from different aspects.
Yeah.
And that conversation evolved, and we thought surely everyone must be grappling with this issue.
Definitely.
And I think that's led to it, no?
I think it does. You know, I think as health providers or health professionals, and then as educators, where we're trying to provide a service, it becomes quite challenging because the child has their own challenge, and then parents have their own desires, wants, values, and it becomes quite a balancing act to handle all of it. You know, I think that's how I remember it coming up. And the other day I put a post up, and it was even though you're a psychologist, it's difficult being a mum, and you know how many people related to that. So I think parenting is challenging no matter what your profession.
And I think sometimes there's a misconception that if you're an educator or a psychologist, it's easier for you to parent because you have that background. Whereas I think sometimes it can be a more of an obstacle because you're so aware of like the pros and the cons, and you have to like walk on eggshells to try to manage that tightrope of a balancing act, like you're saying. Because we can think of the long term as psychologists, damages,
and the implications of the behavior. And I think children have the sixth sense to pick up that doubt and to work with it. I don't know if you're comfortable with speaking a little bit about your experience and challenges with the youth today, or that age group that you guys work with.
I could probably start. Currently, I'm actually at a public school in Reservoir Hills, and our main feeder area is from a socio-economic group of learners that are very disadvantaged. So you'll find that their main challenges are mainly the physiological needs, which are not met at all, actually.
So you're talking about food, like basic food,
well, firstly,
shelter?
we could start off with food and shelter. You find that these kids are always in need of something to eat. I had several learners always asking me if I could buy them something, please. They wouldn't have clothes to wear. They don't have shoes. We have a feeding scheme that's going to start next year. And then, obviously, secondly, it's the psychological and emotional needs. Quite a few of them come from broken homes. Quite a few of them don't have any role models. A large number of them obviously have parents that are working fairly long hours, so there's no or very little parental supervision. And you can actually see the impact of all of this when these kids actually come into your class. They're tired. They lack the motivation that maybe a school, a more affluent school would probably have, a learner in that school would have. You'd find that these learners don't see education as a way out of their current situation. So it's really very, very difficult working with them in terms of that, because there's only so much you can do within the classroom environment or the school context to try and change that. And I think there has to be more intervention. I don't know what it would be with these learners, because they are in a pretty bad way, most of them actually.
That's quite sad to hear. Shaista, I don't know about you, I keep on thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if the child doesn't have physiological basic
needs are not met,
and then security, and how will they self-actualize? How will they even concentrate? Because if you're hungry, or if you're cold, or if you're not sure what you're going back home to, how can you even listen in class?
That's very true. You see it manifest itself daily with these learners. So it's a pretty uphill battle for most educators, because we're obviously hamstrung to a syllabus that we need to basically keep track of
almost,
and then obviously trying to cater for all the other needs. It's very, very difficult. So in these schools you'll find that you are dealing with these issues, where the physiological needs are not met, where the emotional needs are also not met, and then obviously you'd find that the results obviously wane quite a bit. And it seems like a vicious cycle that you can't really get out of with most of these kids.
Sure. And it's amazing how the challenges, because I'm thinking, okay, now I'm in private practice, the challenges I see are very much a sense of entitlement, boundaries with parents, like I think first world problems.
Yeah,
so
that's
to
true.
hear, what's
the other end of the coin.
The other end of the coin. And Shaista, your challenges?
I think I concur quite strongly with Hassan and what he's saying, in terms of the fact that, well, my age group is different. I work with 2-year-old onwards to 17, 18-year-olds. Though 18-year-olds wouldn't be classified, right? That's our children. Some of them. So I find the same issues. The poor socioeconomic background, I think, plays a very strong role. Parents who are working long hours, or who are absentee parents, for whatever the reasons, whether that's because they're working long hours or they're just emotionally just not available, unstructured, unstable home environments, abusive home environments, all these impact on the children. And what I find it so interesting, like even if you look at it wider, we have a changing times, and even the generational gap is far wider than it used to be because of technology. Even if we look at changing laws today in the country and how they govern how we parent, or
like legally you cannot hit
your
your
child.
An educator can't touch the child.
Yeah, and I think these kinds of changing dynamics create confusion for parents because they oscillate between I'm either going to be too authoritarian or I can't inflict any kind of discipline whatsoever. And again, it's about finding that balance between the two, because what you end up getting is we get parents who are coming in and they're not sure what to do with the child in terms of boundary setting, or they set no boundaries. So you get on the one hand, as you're saying, the entitled kids growing up with no sense of what a consequence is or how to work towards a goal. There must be instant gratification, meaning if I want something, I must get it right now. There's no such thing as delayed gratification. And all these impacts on the child as they're growing up. And I feel what we don't do is we fail to see that what I call toxic parenting or toxic love, where you don't set boundaries and structure for your child, because you are not raising your child, you're raising an adult of tomorrow. And this adult is going to go into a workforce and have to face criticism, hard work, negativity, demanding.
It's not all going to be cushy.
And what are you going to do?
Hand it to them.
Exactly. And you're not going to throw a tantrum there at work and say, I'm going to leave this job. And then leave multiple jobs. Yeah. So you need to teach them from a young age how to deal with frustration tolerance, how to delay gratification. So for example, if you need a toy, what have you done to earn that toy? Rather than, okay, I have money, I can go and buy you the toy right now. Right. So it becomes toxic then when we don't establish these kind of boundaries.
And I think with both parents working now, there comes this dynamic that we can't give you time, but we can give you things.
Let's compensate.
Or the time that I'm spending with you, I don't want to be the bad guy.
Yes.
Let someone else discipline you. I think we're all a little bit guilty of that.
Yes.
Hassan's laughing, so I'm not interpreting that, Hassan. But here's the other part. I always get into so-called conversations and dialogues about this. Recently, I've been hearing this line, I'm my child's best friend. And I get that you're supposed to be close. But that for me brings up a few warning bells that, anybody can be your child's friend. Yes, you should be able to be their safe place and they should communicate with you. But when you're your child's friend as such, can you draw the boundaries? Can you be authoritative and draw that balance? Can you say no without feeling guilty? How do we draw that balance between being approachable but also not being respected?
Yeah. I think for me, that's where the core of the problem stems when you want to be a child's best friend. Your job and your role is not to be their best friend. Your job is to be parent.
Yeah.
And we can't mix that. You can have a friendly relationship. You must have an open, trusting, giving relationship with your child. Your child must be feeling open and welcome and safe enough to come to you with his or her concerns and be able to talk to you and have a dialogue. But you are essentially their parent. You are not there to be the best friend.
No one can replace that.
No one can. Yeah. And it's not your role. In fact, why are you socializing your child to be the best friend? What's happening with the child in school?
That you have to,
That you have to play that role. And then when they see other authoritarian figures like teachers or muallimas or molanas, what are you seeing them as?
To be friends,
are you thinking we're going to be buds? And then they're not expecting this. So I think you're blurring boundaries for the child and you're creating a false sense of reality for the child. So no, your job is not to be a child's best friend. That's what they have peers for. And that's why we send them to school and other arenas, for them to socialize and get their own friends and develop relationships and maintain relationships. Your job is sole parenting. And that doesn't...
And to get them ready for independence or some sort of independence.
And that independence can lead to them developing their own best friends.
Right. And I don't know if you've noticed that it seems like parenting, and you mentioned a few of it, it has become, or it seems to have become more and more challenging. Does anything come up to you in terms of unique challenges of this time?
I think if we look at socio-culturally, if we look at politically, I know when I was a kid, and I assume you too, and Hassan.
At some point we were kids.
Yeah, we were all kids at some point. That when we were young, we were told by our parents, go out and play and come before Maghrib. Because we had a socio-cultural context in which you could do that. And we also learned akhlaq was a big thing. You have to respect elders, you have to know the place of elders, and you have to know your place. Today I feel those boundaries are blurred, and we almost adultify children. And we don't teach them, this is your place and this is your role. And then technology, as much as children are engrossed in their own games or their own tech gadgets, so are we with our phones, our laptops.
Definitely.
And what we are doing. And as you mentioned previously, it's so easy to say, here, go play that game. Go occupy
Just for
yourself.
some peace of mind for us.
Just for some peace of mind for us.
Yeah.
But at the expense in the long run of both you and your child and that relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the confusion is coming, because parents are coming back home. We now have a dual parenting working household, as opposed to before, where you'd primarily have one parent
Someone
working and somebody would be
keep an eye
home.
on them. Yeah.
So when you came back home, mom was there, she had lunch ready for you, and you knew. Now you go home and generally there's nobody there.
Right.
So you have to sort of figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And then
But I mean, I get you. The technology, I think the amount of choices, the time that we had for our children, all of these are things that, are negotiable now. But these are things that are coming up. I think we have to stop for a quick ad break, and then we're going to come up and just discuss this a little bit more.
Radio Al Ansar, Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM.
ليس كل الناس أهل للعلاء خذ قرارا وانطلق لا تنتظر ليس كل الناس أهل للعلاء ليس كل الناس أهل للعلاء.
Welcome back to Mindful Matters, where we're having an interesting conversation on Parenting 2.0. So we're just talking about, challenges that are very much unique to this time. And, the normal ones come up. There's no surprise. Technology, parents having less time, choices, more limitations in terms of what a parent can do or can't do. And Mr. Hussain has been sitting very quietly there, so we have to draw him out. Tell me, Hussain, as an educator, have you noticed, because I keep on thinking in terms of the use of technology, have you noticed how the learners are learning? Are they able to concentrate? Has technology had an effect, or is it oozing into the classroom?
Most definitely, Nazia. I think in the last 10 years, we've probably seen an exponential growth with the use of technology in classrooms. I could still go back to the first day I actually presented something. I think it was a PowerPoint, and I was quite amazed that you could actually project this piece of information that you would previously write on the board, and then maybe show them a short video clip. And initially everybody was actually quite amazed, because it was a shift from the simple chalk and talk that you used to do. But the weird thing started creeping in after that. I noticed that kids actually started getting bored with even at that level of technology, because their pace at which they were exposed to technology far exceeded what you created in the classroom. They really got bored with stuff like that. Each time now you put up a PowerPoint, they would literally fall asleep halfway through that PowerPoint. And that's quite simply because the media-rich content that they are exposed to across various platforms, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or watching a movie, basically is far more creative than what anything or anyone could create in the classroom. Right. So as an educator, you have to basically you have to basically change the way you were actually creating your lessons. And that, I think, led me to my path of changing the way I actually teach. Now there's various apps you could use. There's various techniques you could use to basically present the same argument that you would probably previously only do on a PowerPoint. And that is, I think, the way to go now with learners. Secondly, they have far more access to the internet than they had, say, 10 years ago. So if you tell them, listen, we're going to look at this exam paper from that year, and they could just as well access it on their phones. You just have to basically either use a Dropbox or use WhatsApp or use some platform on which they could access it, and they would have immediate access to the content that you are using as well. So the way a teacher actually evolves with technology is very important, because I can assure you that more than 80 to 90% of the schools are still using the very basic technique of teaching. And I think that's a serious problem with the way information is presented nowadays. Obviously, they've been hamstrung by maybe the finances of how they go about doing this. Schools don't have enough money for projectors and smart boards and apps and data and stuff like that. But I think it's up to the individual now, especially if you're a passionate educator, you need to actually keep up with these latest trends. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind and you're going to leave the kid behind with you as well. Because they're going to get thoroughly bored with an ordinary chalk and talk lesson now. And that's a major challenge in education at the moment. It's the digitization of the content that you are teaching.
So you have to kind of go with the flow and make it
Yes,
work
you have
for
to.
you.
And it's got nothing to do with the fact that, you're old school and you've done things in a certain way and it worked for you. Probably will still work for you, but I mean the amount of effort you're going to have to put in now with that same type of, I don't know.
Sounds like you have to be dynamic. You have
yes,
to be
you
with
have
the
to
time
be.
and constantly be
And you
ready
have
for-
to be constantly researching on what's out there, what's the latest stuff. You have to be continuously prepping and re-prepping. For example, if I used a worksheet last year, it's unlikely I'm going to end up using the same worksheet again this year. Because firstly, the amount or the volume of questions have changed over 1 year. Just 1 year. You probably will get at least another 50 questions that are new in the same section that learners were not exposed to last year. And it is your duty as an educator to
keep on top
ensure
of
that
it.
you've updated your
That's pretty
content
scary because everything is changing so fast.
very
It's hard
fast.
to keep up to the pace
And you know
of
what?
it.
These kids are tech savvy. So they will know whether you're doing a paper that's 10 years old or you're doing the really last year's paper with the latest trend in questioning. Even that has changed.
But I think, as parents, we're also under a lot of pressure because now, before when children ask their parents something, you'd be giving it to them from experience and wisdom.
Yes.
But now, whether you're an educator, whether you're just a parent, whether you're a health professional, they will go and Google it or check it up and question you on that.
Exactly.
Because they have that amount of access to information.
Very true. And that basically creates an additional responsibility for you as an educator to make sure that whatever you're doing is current, it's relevant, and it's accurate.
But I heard a saying that put it into perspective for me. It says that children are very good observers, but not the
Yes.
best of interpreters. So they'll take the wisdom or they'll take the information, but how they use it or what they make of it now,
That's true.
we're not too sure of.
And in line with that, if with them being good observers, if we look at social media and social content today, technology in particular, everything is so insta. Like Maggie quick 2-minute noodles, that's gone like so old school now because it takes too long.
Yeah.
So like you get snap stories which last a few seconds. You have we went from Facebook being too long because you had to write to Instagram, which is where you just see a picture. So the level of arousal has changed to Insta, quick.
It's almost like an addiction, like you need quicker, faster.
And also less interpretation, isn't it? Because our cognitive styles are going to be affected in a way. As you said, we are observing in constant observation mode, but interpretation is not keeping up. So then I would think the challenge for an educator would be, how do I keep this kid whose attention span perhaps is now sitting at 10 seconds attuned to a class for 1 hour?
Exactly.
So I think that would be a challenge, and I don't know whether you'd have to perhaps, Hassan, use videos or bright colors or, I don't know.
Just on that, I remember when I was in school, there was this very difficult section in physics that you couldn't really teach a learner practically because it's impossible to show them something that actually fits that theory, because it just doesn't happen on this planet.
Yeah.
But they've now developed apps which basically solidifies the concept perfectly, which now basically enhances the content with something that they can see visually, and they've become very visual learners.
Yeah, I was just going to
nowadays.
say, it seems like a visual is the way now. You can't just
Exactly.
imagine.
So you can't just tell
Imagination is
them
not
that this is a
used.
fact. And when we were in school, if somebody told us that this is true, you kind of accepted it as the authority telling you this is true. Now with this questioning mind that you have there, you can't just tell them that this is true or this is a scientific fact. You'd have to some way,
But in
allow them to.
accepting and not questioning so much, there was also some sense of security. I don't know
True.
if you get
Yes.
that
Yeah.
this is taken for granted and now what, but
Yeah.
constantly questioning.
Yes. It's like there's too much
There's
information
just too
to
much
process.
information. And here's this young man sitting here. I think he's getting bored with us. So Hasnain, as parents or as adults, we get caught into our own way of seeing things. As a child, what do you think is a good parent? What qualities should a good parent have?
Well,
Yeah, Hasnain?
I think a good parent is usually when the parent and the child have a good relationship with each other. They're not like they're they're not discommunicating with each other. Like, for example, the child won't talk to the parent all the time, but if the child wants something, then the child will just talk to the parent. But a good relationship with the parent is basically when your child is looking up to you, but you put down your levels of what they must do, how they must do certain things. They must look up to you, and that's the qualities of a good parent, to push their child and make sure that the child also looks up to them and not think that there's some bad guy doing these things for them.
I love I think he's saying a parent must be approachable.
Yeah.
You must be able to talk to them. They must come down to the level of the child in the sense of, I get you, isn't it?
Mm.
And
Also sounds like parents must create a safe space for dialogue.
Yeah, I think so. But I think respect also came up in that.
Yes.
You know, you have to respect each other. And what was the push about now? Did you say they must push you to?
They must push you to do well in your school subjects and certain things, like push you in certain problems that you have in life, and make sure that you do well and you excel in all the things that you do.
Okay. So that they must show an interest. There must be a vested interest in parenting.
And perhaps push you out of your comfort zone as well. Like
I think
sometimes
Shaista's pushing us here. But they don't want to be pushed out of their comfort zone, Shaista.
So important to experience new things.
She's trying to give him an experiential lesson here. But I mean, what about Hasnain? Okay, here's the common struggle that I see in my practice all the time, where the parent will say the child is spending too much time on technology. And the child will say, but I need to keep in contact with my friends. I need to keep in contact with my friends. Common one.
Yeah.
How do you think we should draw that balance as parents?
So there must be certain times for, like, you get a certain amount of time to use your technology, and then you get a certain amount of time to also, like, interact with your family. But also sometimes with technology, families have a good time using them. Like, for example, they may play a game on their phone, or maybe watch a movie or something like that.
Okay, so we can use technology to connect as well.
Yes.
And I think as parents, we must be aware, we must model the behavior. So if we're playing on the phone all the time and tell them not to, that's not okay, isn't it?
Yes.
But I think it's also important what he's saying. There must be times. It's structured.
And
So time to play.
How long or how many hours is a reasonable time, do you
Well,
think?
usually maybe just not let them access technology on the weekdays.
Oh, nice.
And
Okay.
then just
Round of
use it on the
applause for
weekends.
Hasnain.
Just use it on the weekends rather, and like if it's exam time or stuff, like no technology should be seen by the child whatsoever.
We've got you on tape. So Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
Is it Monday to Friday? Is it best
No.
not to have technology?
Yeah, Monday to Friday, but when Friday is done on school, then you
So
may
Friday
use-
afternoon technology is a good
Friday.
idea.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how many hours? Because I don't think you should be sitting like 12 hours.
No, not
through the
12 hours.
night.
Like preferably about 4 hours maximum.
Ooh.
Maximum,
Ooh.
I'm saying. Not
But isn't there some... Shaista, I'm putting you in an awkward spot here, but I can't remember this correctly. Isn't it beyond, I think, half an hour or something, the brain...
Overstimulated.
Or gets overstimulated with technology. So even if you do 20 minutes or half an hour, you take a break and then you go back.
Yeah.
Because too much of technology actually leads to digital dementia. Hasnain, have you heard about that? Digital dementia. It's when the brain gets lazy because we rely on, like the calculator. Before the calculator, we could all do mental maths, right? The calculator came, and then what happened? Hasnain, you're nodding a lot. Do you have anything to add to that one?
Yes, actually, I find it quite strange because when I was in school, I think only in matric I used a calculator, and prior to that, quite a bit of it was still done. I mean, you could rationalize it through. And now I do that in school. I mean, I actually don't own a scientific calculator up to today.
Wow.
And most of the work that I do, most of it, I try at my very best to actually do it without a calculator. And kids are amazed.
What about phone numbers? I know,
True.
even personally, I struggle to remember
True.
phone numbers, except those that I knew from back in the day.
Exactly.
Those somehow have stayed. We don't use our mind. And
Yeah.
yet, how many digits are phone numbers? About 10 digit cell phone numbers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we struggle to remember that. Yet before, there was no choice.
But I think before it was also limited to the number of combination of numbers you had to remember.
Right.
Maybe it was
Or
about
3-1
10
stuck
or
on everything.
15.
Yeah.
Now you probably have over 1,000 numbers on your directory.
Yeah.
Even the best of guys would struggle to remember all of them, but you'd probably remember most of them that are close to you. But everyone, I think it will be very difficult. Again, it's that information overload that's actually coming in over here.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, the attention span issue coming up even in gaming. Because if you look at the current popular gaming is Fortnite.
Right.
And then you have them running around building things at one point. Then they, I think, trying to shoot people. I'm not sure. Then they're flying.
Aggression.
Yeah. And then they're dancing randomly. And then they're randomly dancing. And then you wonder, how does dancing fit in? But it also isn't it to retain their attention and their focus in a different way, in a fun way. Suddenly let's break out into dance. So I think even gaming is recognizing that the attention span we've got to keep on entertaining. And that's for me concerning, because like you spoke about dementia and that limited attention span that we seeing in school. And then parents often would come to us, I'm not sure if you've seen this, I'm sure you've experienced this though, where they say, I think my child has ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I think they need medication. They actually don't.
Yeah, I think the whole generation has become ADHD because we all cannot concentrate due to the instant gratification.
Yeah.
And that part of our mind is not stimulated the way it was before.
And the change of context as well. Whereas before we would go out, we would play for hours. We often had, we didn't have the tools to play, so we had to use imagination and creativity to create a game. Like a box could be a fort. A stick could become your cricket bat. We had to use creativity and imagination. I think children today are disadvantaged because they don't have to. It's all put there.
Because I think about these are school holidays. How many parents are sitting with, oh my God, what am I going to do to entertain these children? Because I'm bored. It's a dreaded line that it happens from the time the eyes open. I'm bored. What are we doing today?
Yeah.
Hasnain, you can talk.
Actually, going to the fact about gaming, my school, they actually do this thing where it's very fun. It's an educational game. You might have heard of it. It's called Mathletics. So basically, you can verse your friends online, and it's actually very fun because you try to see who's smarter in maths.
Also, it's competitive as well.
It's competitive.
So it's called Mathletics.
Yes.
So can anybody download it, or is it just only Alpha learners?
No, other learners too, but you're going to have to need like a password and stuff like that. But it's very fun because you see, the good thing about it is educational, but it also never gets boring because you always try to beat your friends and always try and have fun whilst you're playing it.
So you can use it in terms of make it competitive, make it interactive.
Listen to Hasnain, pro gamer here, huh?
Yeah, I can see.
Gaming is not a bad thing.
I spoke about being bored and he's like, here, use this now. But Shaista, I wonder if we were talking about parenting, and I think just from a psychological perspective, if we can just inform our listeners about the different parenting styles that are there. Because I think it gets quite confusing. We speak about authoritarian, authoritative. What exactly do these entail?
I think just overall, one is responsiveness in terms of how much independence you're willing to grant. The other, for lack of a better word, is demandingness. Okay. How much of strict obedience you require. So how much obedience parents demand, how much freedom they grant, and how these two behaviors mesh to go a long way towards defining the parental styles. Okay. Generally, there's 4 broad categories, as you've mentioned. Authoritarian, where the parents tend to be very strict and controlling. They have a very strong sense of justice and the need for obedience.
Those are our parents back in the day.
Yeah. Remember back in my day, it was like if you did wrong, like even, a look was enough to kill you. Yeah. Or like you would get a shoe thrown at you.
Because I said so.
because I said so.
And then you don't question
famous
beyond
answer.
That. No is a full sentence,
Now children will come up with Google options. Before it was because I said so was enough. Then you have the authoritative, which is while retaining authority and control, these parents are generally warmer and more communicative than the authoritarian parents. I think that could be a bit confusing. Authoritarian and authoritative.
So authoritative, we must think about our parents and grandparents. What we said goes.
Authoritarian. Yeah, that was what you said goes. There's no chance for negotiation here. Right. And authoritative is more flexibility whilst retaining boundaries.
So that's the healthiest form of parenting.
That's the healthiest. The best adjusted children, they say, come from those who have experienced this style of parenting. Right. Then you get permissive, where generally the parents are warm and accepting. They make few demands on the children and anything
they're
goes. Very lenient.
And I think scarily we're aiming for authoritative, but most of us are ending up to be permissive.
Yes. Or uninvolved, where the parent demands almost nothing of the child and they give them nothing in return except near absolute freedom. So they're low in demandingness and responsiveness.
So how wouldn't that be almost uninvolved? Couldn't it be like negligent parenting?
I would think, would that not border on negligence? Because you're
we know
leaving your
that,
child to parent themselves.
And a child rather have negative attention than no attention. This is where they act up and,
And a child needs attention. They need parenting. They need boundaries. So I think the authoritative is the best of all the styles, because you're setting your boundaries, you're having structure, but you're flexible enough to allow for a dialogue and
you
a
can
safe
accommodate
space.
your view and accommodate the view
child's
of the
view.
child in front of you. We've come, time always goes so fast on this show. Before we go into our final thoughts, I wonder if each of you could just give a little message or anything you think we left out just for our listeners. Hassan, would it be okay if we started with you?
Yeah, sure. I think as we go down into the future, in terms of, I'm more involved in the technology side of everything, and as a teacher, I think we need to be very, very careful about where all of this is eventually taking us, because you're going to find that as technology progresses, you're going to find that learners are going to become far more demanding, parents are going to become equally more demanding. And I've actually read a very interesting article in something called Business Tech. I think in the year 2030 or 2040, Google's going to develop a chip which is going to be implanted in you, and whatever you could literally access on your phone, you'd be able to basically assimilate that through some kind of neural feedback mechanism. So it all basically means that at some point the way we teach is going to change. The whole paradigm of how teaching is going to take place is going to change. But that's obviously way down in the future. But you can already see these changes occurring right now. The biggest worry, I think, is the way parents actually structure the learner's experience with technology. I think very few of them actually use it, to be very honest with you. As parents, we rely mainly on the educator to do everything for the kid, and
so almost like
our
be in
investment
denial.
in the child in terms of the education is very little. We've abdicated that responsibility solely to the educator. I think as a parent we need to be a little more involved, at least the basics. How was your day? What did you do in school? Who you spent the day with? Did you get any homework?
Right.
And create the structure that Shaista was talking about. I mean, at the end of the day, at some point you're not going to be there to supervise this kid all the time. So he should be able to basically get into a routine. And that has to start from a young age. And they need to basically change with the changing technology as well. It's pointless you as a parent actually just asking him all of this without checking he can actually even use some of the technology that they've been exposed to. I think some of these schools are introducing coding next year as well to all these kids. I don't even know how that's going to impact on all these little ones. So yeah, there's going to be some big changes coming down, and it's going to be interesting to see how things are going to change in education in the future, and how we as parents are going to adapt to it as well.
Thanks for that, Hassan.
I think with the evolving times and the change of technology, for me, there's some old ones that still ring true for me. I think akhlaq is your foundation. Set that and you set the tone. I think that be a parent, don't be their best friend. Boundary setting is so important. If I can stress, boundaries. And don't have role confusion as I just said, who's the parent and who's the child. Always be clear. The child is a child, you are the parent, it's your job to lead and set an example, to be a model for the child in how they problem solve, how they manage conflict, variety of issues. And also, the best form of love is teach them consequences and delay gratification. So I remember when I was a kid, I would have to save up my money in the entire year, and at the end of the year my mom would take me shopping and I could use my money to buy toys. So you had to wait an entire 12 months before you could get your toy.
So you learned patience.
So you had to learn patience. Teach that to your child. Don't just give them everything they ask for. Let them have earned it, so that they know what is what mehnat or what hard work means, so that they can appreciate that, because that's the individual that you're going to have as an adult contributing to society tomorrow. So do yourself and society a favor. and set those tones, I feel.
I saw a nice meme that sums this up. It says, don't prepare the road for the child, prepare the child for the road. And I think with that, we're going to do something very different this week. The final thoughts would be read by Hasnain, and so I will pass the mic on to him.
Avoid comparisons and labels. You want to be the kind of parent who takes the time to install in your child good manners, habits and behavior. Walk the talk. Model the behavior you want. Let your child make mistakes. Do nothing. Let them be responsible for themselves and face the natural consequences. Reconsider your use of food and money to comfort or praise. Look behind bad behavior. Trust your gut and be ready to embrace change. Salams, and remember, be kind, be mindful and take care of yourself.
Ma'asalam. From me, your host. See you next week.
Radio Al Ansar Podcasts.